continuing along with a little bit more Buddhanusati. Going to bring to mind the before enlightenment, the Bodhisattva's remarkable qualities and his incredible capacity to strive for the sake of his goal. We recall, I mentioned the other day that after going forth, the Buddha studied with his first teacher, and his first teacher had 7th jhana, infinite base of nothingness. And then the Bodhisattva was looking at him and he said, well, this is attainable for one who has the 5 spiritual powers we talked about the other day: sattha, faith; viriya, energy; sati, mindfulness; samadhi, concentration; and panya, wisdom. These things that we're cultivating in this retreat also. So he said, this is attainable for one with these qualities. I also have these qualities. So he applied himself, and in not too long he attained to that attainment, 7th jhana. But then he had the insight, as blissful, as radiant, as profound as it isn't leading onwards, because it is still a condition which is subject to degeneration. It's pretty amazing. I've said before, it's pretty amazing that the Buddha had the sati to know that. Because most people, if you and I were to experience the 7th jhana, we would, I would say, most likely attach. We would think that that was really great, and we'd be off to the Brahma realm for a very long time. But the Buddha had the sati to see this amazing, subtle, profound concentration also degenerates. It's a condition. It's one of the profoundly, utterly wholesome. It's at the most wholesome spectrum of conditions, the most refined samadhi, but it doesn't liberate one from samsara. So then he went on to another teacher, and that teacher was teaching the 8th jhana, and similarly the Buddha thought, yes, this is attainable for one with the 5 spiritual powers, and so I too can develop this, and he did. And not long he attained to the state of neither perception or non-perception, an incredibly subtle and profound type of concentration, what they call arupa jhana, mental absorption. And those teachers, both those teachers, offered the Bodhisattva shared leadership of their communities. They were so impressed with him, and he thanked them but refused. And then he went off on his own, and he didn't quite know what to do at that time. He'd already developed the most refined and subtle types of concentration. So what he did next was he was practicing with the extreme of physical suffering by limiting his food to the barest of minimum just to stay alive. And he became extremely emaciated. Now during this time, he didn't allow himself, although he was perfectly capable of entering any of the jhana, he didn't allow himself that, because he'd had the insight, this isn't leading onwards. And so what he was doing was he was seeing as contemplating the extent to which a body feels pain to its absolute limit. Is that the way out? And as we know, he had the insight that that also isn't the way out, and he had his insight into the middle way. But it's nice to bring to mind the example of just how mighty, how powerful, how determined the Bodhisattva was, and because it elicits feelings of gratitude. So one shouldn't be intimidated. One shouldn't think, well, wow, the Bodhisattvas are amazing, the Buddha is amazing. It's these very same qualities that we're cultivating now. It's just that they cultivate them for a long time. And then if one does cultivate these qualities for a long time, then one ends up with that kind of extraordinary capacity, very sharp faculties. But just to read a little bit, so we engender a feeling of awe and then a feeling of gratitude. We think of how much effort the Bodhisattva put into attaining his insight so that he could liberate himself, but then also share with us all of that insight and place us on the path which leads to the deathless. So I read a little. I thought, suppose I entirely cut off food. Then deities came to me and said, "Good sir, do not entirely cut off food. If you do so, we shall inject divine food into your pores, and you will live on that." I thought, if I claim to be completely fasting, and these deities inject divine food into my pores, and I live on that, then I shall be lying. I dismissed them, saying, "There is no need." I thought, suppose I take very little food, say a handful each time, whether it is bean soup, or lentil soup, or pea soup, and I did so. And as I did so, my body reached a state of extreme emaciation. My limbs became like the jointed segments of vine stems, or bamboo stems, because of eating so little. My backside became like a camel's hoof. The projections on my spine stood forth like corded beads. My ribs jutted out as gaunt and as the crazy rafters of an old roofless barn. The gleam of my eyes sunk far down in their sockets, looking like the gleam of water sunk far down in a deep well. My scalp shriveled and withered, as a green gourd shrivels and withers in the wind and sun. If I touched my belly skin, I encountered my backbone too. And if I touched my backbone, I encountered my belly skin too. For my belly skin cleaved to my backbone. If I made water or evacuated my bowels, I fell over on my face. If I tried to ease my body by rubbing my limbs with my hands, the hair, rotted at its roots, fell away from my body as I rubbed, because of eating so little. When human beings saw me now, they said, "The monk Gautama is a black man." Other human beings said, "The monk Gautama is not a black man, he is a brown man." Other human beings said, "The monk Gautama is neither a black man nor a brown man, he is fair-skinned." So much had the clear, bright colour of my skin degenerated through eating so little. And as I strove to subdue myself beside the broad Naranja river, absorbed unflinchingly, to gain the true surcease of bondage, Mara came and spoke to me with words garbed in pity thus: "Oh, you are thin, and you are pale, and you are in death's presence too. 1,000 parts are pledged to death, but life still holds one part of you. Live, sir, life is the better way. You can gain merit if you live. Come, live the holy life and pour libations on the holy fires, and thus a world of merit gain. What can you do by struggling now? The path of struggling too is rough and difficult and hard to bear." Now Mara, as he spoke these lines, drew near until he stood close by. The Blessed One replied to him as he stood thus: "O evil one, cousin of the negligent, you have come here for your own ends. Now merit I need not at all. Let Mara talk of merit then to those that stand in need of it. For I have faith and energy, and I have understanding too. So while I thus subdue myself, why do you speak to me of life? There is this wind that blows can dry even the rivers running streams. So while I thus subdue myself, why should it not dry up my blood? And as the blood dries up, then bile and phlegm run dry. The wasting flesh becalms the mind. I shall have more of mindfulness and understanding, and I shall have greater concentration. For living thus I come to know the limits to which feeling goes. My mind looks not to sense desires. You see a being's purity. Your first squadron is sense desires. Your second is boredom. Then hunger and thirst compose the third, and craving is the fourth. The fifth is sloth and avidity, while cowardice lines up as sixth. Uncertainty is seventh. The eighth is malice paired with obstinacy. Gain, honour and renown besides, and ill-won notoriety. Self-praise and denigrating others These are your squadrons, Mara. These are the black ones fighting squadrons. None but the brave will conquer them. To gain bliss by the victory, I fly the banner that denies retreat. Shame on life here, I say. Better I die in battle now than choose to live on in defeat. There are ascetics and Brahmins that have surrendered here, and they are seen no more. They do not know the paths the pilgrim travels by. So seeing Mara's squadrons now, arrayed all around with elephants, I sally forth to fight, that I may not be driven from my post. Your serried squadrons, which the world with all its gods cannot defeat, I shall now break with understanding, as with a stone a raw clay pot. And I thought, whenever a monk or Brahmin has felt in the past, or will feel in the future, or feels now, painful, racking, piercing feeling due to striving, it can equal this but not exceed it. But by this grueling penance I have attained no distinction higher than the human state, worthy of the Noble One's knowledge and vision. Might there be another way to enlightenment? So as we can see, the Buddha was intending to increase his sati, virya, sati, samadhi and panya in his striving. That was his goal. And isn't it remarkable that he knew all of Mara's weapons? Even before he was enlightened, he knew these are obstructions, these are distractions, these are things which overcome the mind and take it away from the search for truth. He could see them all very clearly, and he wasn't succumbing to any of them. It's really extraordinary. But then he had the insight that actually the wisdom and the sati wasn't benefiting from that extreme austerity. So then he had the insight. He remembered that when he entered the first jhana under the rose apple tree as a young man, as a young boy, and he remembered that first jhana accompanied by focused thought, and he thought maybe that's the way out. And it turned out that it was. He went and sat under the Bodhi tree and allowed his mind to enter the jhana. He allowed himself to eat some food. He allowed himself to enter absorptions. And then outside of the absorption, he contemplated this body-mind phenomena. And what he did was he was recollecting his past lives. So it says 100, 500, 1,000, 10,000. And then he contemplated the lives of other beings. He could see there, with his mind fortified with samadhi, he was able to recollect that arising and passing, arising and passing, arising, staying some time and passing due to conditions. And then he was able to investigate the conditions and had his insight into the not-self nature of them. So it's presented in several ways exactly what he was contemplating, and or from several different angles. He was meditating all night under the Bodhi tree. And so the first way it's presented is that he was recollecting his past lives. The second way it's represented is that he was having insight into paticca samuppada, the dependent co-arising of all of the factors that make up a body and mind and lead to rebirth. And he had the insight that birth must have a cause. The result of birth is aging and death and separation. But because of the very fact of aging and death and birth, because these are conditions, there must be the unconditioned. There must be that which doesn't die. He had this very deep intuition. And then another way that he reviewed the cause of birth. The cause of birth is attachment to the pleasure that one can experience in a body and a mind. And then he was looking at the overall picture, and he was seeing that the drawbacks far outweighed the pleasure, because bodies and minds are subject to change, subject to disintegration, subject to being separated from what is loved and being associated with what one dislikes. And there's an enormous amount of suffering that comes in the body-mind in these five khandhas. And so he had seeing that the attachment to the pleasure was the cause, the craving leading to clinging. Then he was able to let go of the attachment, let go of the clinging, and then seeing the truth, anicca, dukkha, anatta, seeing that truth, those three characteristics, letting go of his attachment, he was liberated. So it's, I just like to contemplate those. Can you imagine when you read that list, all of Mara's tricks, it's pretty amazing. And we all have to admit that we're still subject to them to some degree. We're not in the same position as the Bodhisattva in his last life, where he can see all of Mara's tricks and that he's overcoming them. He cannot be perturbed by Mara at all. But we're still having our dance with Mara. We still have some challenges. But fortunately for us, the Buddha has pointed exactly to the insight which liberates in many ways. So yesterday I went through the Dhammacakka Sutta, I went through the Four Noble Truths, his insight into the Four Noble Truths, that it's because of craving that one attaches, and that craving is to be let go of, abandoned. Dukkha is to be known for what it is, you simply know it. We don't deny dukkha, we don't run from it, we sit down like we're doing and we have a good look at it. What's the suffering in the body like? What's the suffering in the mind like? And when we identify the various types of craving for, craving not for, and the reaction that we add to the dukkha that's in a body, and we practice letting go, little bit by little bit, letting go of our attachments, letting go of our cravings, letting go of our desires, our aversions. And we cultivate these qualities, faith, we put forth effort, giving rise to energy, consistently reapply mindfulness. And in doing this, samadhi is born, different people having different capacity to experience samadhi. But whatever samadhi one experiences is good. You feel content with it, grateful for it, and you just know that as one more condition, and continue being mindful, and continue laying the conditions, and reflecting when we can with the feelings. Notice the way they change. Even the breath, one in-breath, it only stays for a little while and then it's gone. And then there's a space, and then that space is replaced by the out-breath, and then there's another space and another in-breath. And even within the breath, there's the beginning, the middle, the end of one breath. All of those feelings changing, and you can't hold any of these things in place. You can't hold them still. Their nature is to constantly be moving. Everything's in flux. This is one of the things that we can contemplate as we do our breath meditation. And when we practice with Bud-dho, it's a synonym for being mindful, for being aware, for being awake. And we just bring this awareness to notice, just pay attention, and just notice the impermanence, the constant changing, as you're aware of the feeling as it is, in a relaxed way, just relaxing into it as much as you can. You also notice it arises, it ceases. It arises, it ceases. And we practice in this way, and the sati gets a little stronger, insights get a little deeper, and our capacity to let go of unskillful reactions deepens. And the ignorance which affects us as to the nature of the truth gets less and less. So this ignorance makes the mind dark. When we grasp at things, we want things to be permanent. We think we're a self. And all you have to do is keep meditating on the breath and contemplating impermanence and asking yourself, where is this self? And not being able to find it. You just keep practicing in this way. Ignorance gets less and less. Mindfulness gets stronger and stronger. Wisdom gets deeper and deeper. Brightness increases in the mind. So the Buddha has pointed us very clearly, this is where we need to place our efforts. And fortunately for us, we don't have to spend so many incalculable eons to get liberated. And it says in one of the suttas, if one practices very diligently, one can do it in 7 days, if one's faculties are ripe. If we can't do it in 7 days, we can do it in 7 weeks. If we can't do it in 7 weeks, we do it in 7 years. And that's what the Buddha said anyway. But it's good not to have a time frame, because because what we're really talking about is conditions which are not self, and we just have to keep laying those conditions, and then when those conditions are ripe, realization is the fruit. We talk about path and fruit, so path factors have to be cultivated, and then they come to fruition, and the insight is the result of that. So we just do our practice as sincerely and as diligently as we can, and then enlightenment is the result. As the Buddha said, after his enlightenment, he was contemplating those 5 qualities I've been talking about many times: faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, wisdom. These qualities lead to the deathless, merge in the deathless. Whoever cultivates these qualities sincerely is bound to be liberated. So just recollecting the Buddha one more time, bringing to mind his example, and bringing a quality of faith and a quality of gratitude to the meditation as we recollect Bud-dho, aware of the breath, the changing and the not-self nature of one in-breath and one out-breath.